Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine Podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
In a week of tennis, public sector pay and mortgage misery, Dennis and I take a look at the big hitters of last week. Dennis.
Well, Helen, I make no apologies about bringing artificial intelligence before you once again. The pace of change and its impact is fast-moving and significant, whether for lawyers, for governance advisors, or for our organisational governance. And in all of this, ethics is key. Enter now Lord Evans, Chair of the Committee on Standards. Here's more. On the 4th of July, Lord Evans wrote to government departments and public bodies, asking them for an update on how they are adapting their governance processes for artificial intelligence. The committee's 2020 AI report made recommendations to public organisations making decisions about AI, including private providers of public services, to help them establish effective governance arrangements to manage the ethical risks associated with artificial intelligence. 3 years on, it is clear that AI developments have moved on at some pace. Lord Evans is following up the recommendations made in that report with the intention of publishing a formal update on progress later in the year. The key issue is whether they are currently using AI in decision-making, and if so, how they are adapting their governance processes for AI in line with the recommendations in the committee's report. In the letter, Lord Evans says, "It is our view that technology has the potential to revolutionise the delivery of public services, but it is the way that technology is used and governed by government departments and public bodies that will determine this." The report made a number of recommendations to public organisations making decisions about AI to help them establish effective governance arrangements and to manage the ethical risks associated with the use of AI. The letter asks about how organisations are currently using AI in decision-making, and, if so, how they are adapting their governance processes for AI in line with the recommendations in the 2020 report. The response deadline is the 15th of September. Now, this topic has generated apocalyptic visions of a future that nobody wants. But what is your council doing to dispel such visions? What are you doing on governance and regulation? That is the LLG website and the forum page.
Now, DLUHC have announced it will highlight poor practice by landlords, including on its own social media platforms, with published findings by the Housing Ombudsman of severe maladministration and judgments of the Regulator of Social Housing that consumer standards have been breached. Where appropriate, the Secretary of State will contact landlords to understand how they are taking appropriate steps to address the Ombudsman's and Regulator's findings, with all landlords expected to self-refer breaches of standards to the Regulator of Social Housing. Where landlords have failed to self-refer and a breach is found, they will be contacted by ministers. In 2020-21, the Ombudsman issued a total of 3,455 orders and recommendations following investigations, also made awards of compensation totalling £450,000. As part of their decisions, the Ombudsman can make findings of maladministration where they find that a landlord has failed to do something, done something it shouldn't have done, or caused unreasonable delays. In the most serious cases, the Ombudsman can make a finding of severe maladministration, and such cases are published on the Ombudsman's website and shared with the Regulator of Social Housing. In these most serious cases, residents have often experienced problems over an extended period, and there have been missed opportunities by the landlord to resolve them. In recent times, this has often included repairs, leaks, damp and mould. DLUHC have already published the names of 27 housing associations and local authorities who've had a finding of severe maladministration made against them so far this year. Dennis.
As previously noted in Grapevine, the government has failed in its court challenge to a notice issued by the COVID inquiry, seeking disclosure of various WhatsApp messages between Boris Johnson and others, along with the former Prime Minister's notebooks and diaries. But what might happen next? Here's the story of the WhatsApp case. What's next? So, let's look first at what was the basis of the argument in the case. The argument was about the scope of the inquiry chair's powers under the Inquiries Act 2005 to require the disclosure of documents. The chair, Baroness Hallett, had sought a wide range of material, including WhatsApps, which she considered to be potentially relevant to the lines of investigation being pursued by the inquiry. The Cabinet Office argued that the documents contained unambiguously irrelevant material and that the chair had no power to require disclosure of such material. The court held that the notice issued by the inquiry was served to require the production of documents that relate to a matter in question at the inquiry. Some of the material was undoubtedly about the government's response to the COVID pandemic. The fact that the notice might also yield some irrelevant documents did not mean that the notice was invalid. Under the 2005 Act, inquiries are to be afforded latitude to fish for documents, that is, to make informed but speculative requests for documents relevant to lines of inquiry or documents which lead to new lines of inquiry. And in any case, Section 21 of the Act already contains a mechanism by which a party can make an application to the chair of an inquiry saying that it is not reasonable in all circumstances to require him or her to comply with the notice. So, what happens now? The government has said it accepts the judgment and will not appeal. However, the challenge mechanism described above does still allow the government to make the case that particular pieces of information are irrelevant. The decision on such an application will be one for the chair. It is likely that she will need to see the material itself in order to make that decision. But it may well be that she will agree that some information is indeed irrelevant, in which case she can be expected to return it to the government, and it will not be published or have any bearing on her eventual report. The Cabinet Office has said it will work with the inquiry team on the practical arrangements. In theory, there could still be a further row. If the government continues to disagree with the chair's decision that particular material should be disclosed, it could refuse to produce the document and invite the chair to refer the matter to the court under Section 36 of the 2005 Act. Well, that's the detail, but really, this has been an inauspicious start to the inquiry for the government, and its opening hostile moves have backfired badly and shamefully. Nobody expected them to win this case.
Well, Dennis, it may all well be for nothing if Boris Johnson remains unable to recall his WhatsApp passcode. Now, in other news, the Information Commissioner's Office has issued an enforcement notice to Croydon Council for its poor handling of requests made under the Freedom of Information Act. On the 26th of September 2022, the Information Commissioner directed Croydon Council to improve its compliance with the Freedom of Information Act, and the Council promised improvements. The Commissioner agreed to assess the Council's progress after Easter 2023. The Commissioner received an update from the Council in June this year, and this showed that the Council's progress had not been maintained, with its performance having actually declined. And the Commissioner was deeply disappointed that, having highlighted the high volume of decision notices issued to the Council prior to issuing the practice recommendation, there appears to have been no, quote, discernible improvement from the Council in this regard. So the enforcement notice requires the Council to respond to all outstanding requests over 20 working days old, no later than 6 months from the date of the notice. It also requires to devise and publish an action plan to mitigate any future delays to FOI requests within 35 days from the date of the notice. The consequence of failing to comply with an enforcement notice is that the Commissioner may make written certification of this fact to the High Court, pursuant to Section 54 of the Act. Upon consideration and inquiry by the High Court, the Council may be dealt with as if it had committed a contempt of court. Serious consequences indeed, and a warning to all local authorities to ensure their systems to respond to requests are fit for purpose. Dennis.
A survey by the Local Government Association has found that the number of local councillors who have reported feeling at risk in their role due to rising levels of abuse and intimidation has increased to a new high in the last year. Here's more. The survey, conducted in June 2023, found that 81% of councillors reported experiencing intimidation and/or abuse in their role as a councillor in the last year, which is an 8% increase from the year before. Furthermore, 82% said that they felt at risk at least some of the time whilst fulfilling their role, up from 73% last year. At its annual conference in Bournemouth, the LGA warned that a rise in abuse is preventing councillors from representing the communities that they serve, deterring individuals from standing for election and undermining local democracy. The survey also found that 54% of councillors have seen abuse aimed at them increase since they were first elected, with 31% seeing a sharp increase. Last year, the number of councillors who said that they had experienced abuse frequently has doubled, and the number saying they never experienced abuse reduced from 27% to 19%. Now, a number of respondents also highlighted that the use of social media has increased the level of abuse aimed at councillors, with some members of the public behaving in a way online that they would not do so in person, the survey revealed. The LGA also noted that councils had warned that current policing approaches are inconsistent, under-resourced, and vary too much from place to place. Councils are urging the government to ensure that the experience of councillors on social media is considered in any new Ofcom guidance mandated by the Online Safety Bill, it said.
Now, on Monday, the 10th of July, Attorney General Victoria Prentis, KC MP, delivered a speech to the Institute for Government entitled The Rule of Law and Effective Government. In it, she made some interesting observations which transcend nicely into our Golden Triangle campaign regarding the statutory relationships of the head of paid service, the Section 151 officer, and of course the monitoring officer, together with governance more broadly. I highlight aspects of her speech now which I think resonate well for the separation of powers, importance of the rule of law, and the interplay between government, civil servants, and the judiciary. So Prentis said, government is always at its best and most efficient when each arm of the state has a respectful relationship with the others, and that respectful relationships are also good for the people to whom we bear a weighty responsibility. We need to be good guardians of our democracy and democratic institutions. As to what grown-up and respectful relationships look like, Prentis said, this is where government and the other arms of the state work together, with respect for each other and each other's respective roles, to provide people with sufficient clarity, certainty, and predictability so that they can regulate their behaviour and plan ahead. In turn, this contributes to the economic and social well-being of the country. She went on, an independent judiciary ensures that government exercises its powers in accordance with the law. Judges rightly uphold the work of government when it acts within its powers and prevent overreach when it does not. Our excellent government lawyers carry most of the burden where an issue is particularly legally or politically sensitive, but the law officers may be asked on occasion to give difficult or unwelcome advice. Of course, most lawyers are well used to that feeling. And of particular interest, I feel, Prentis also said, I return to my analogy of parenting, making yourself unpopular when telling children what they cannot do, when you know it is in their best interest. Finally, in synergy with the Golden Triangle, she said, the law officers, the Solicitor General, the Advocate General for Scotland and I give our advice together when possible, particularly when advice may be unwelcome. We are keen to act as a three to make sure our advice is clear and that there is no dispute as to the boundaries. It is better to present a united front and clear boundaries that there is no confusion about what is and is not allowed. And on that note, you can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 27, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.
Have a good week, everyone.